Cora Whitfield had planned 300 funerals in 5 years. This was the first one, where she walked into the chapel, looked at the coffin, and saw her own dead husband smiling at her from the top of it. She was 31 years old. She lived alone in a walk-up in Astoria, Queens. She organized private funerals for people whose deaths were not supposed to be public knowledge, and sometimes for people whose deaths were not real at all. She had learned, over 5 years, that in New York City there were more ways to bury a man quietly than most people had ways to file a tax return. She thought she had seen them all. She had not seen this one. The phone rang at 2 in the morning. A woman's voice, careful, accented. Her name was Inez. She represented a family that preferred not to be named. Serbian Orthodox Chapel in Queens, 6 a.m. Closed casket, no photographs. The dead man was to be buried under the name John Doe. There would be 9 mourners. There would be 1 priest. There would be 1 grieving widow in the front pew, and this was the sentence that made Cora sit up in the dark of her bedroom and lower the phone slowly from her ear. The widow would be her. "I don't play widow," Cora said when she found her voice. "I plan the room. I don't stand in it." "For this one you do," Inez said. "It is included in the price. 15,000 in cash. The car will be at your building in 40 minutes. 15,000 to sit in a pew? 15,000 to be the reason the room looks real." Cora was quiet for a long moment. "Whose funeral is it?" "You will know when you see him," Inez said. "Wear black. Bring the veil in your hallway drawer, the one with the small tear in the corner you never mended. Goodbye, Cora." The line went dead before Cora could ask how a stranger knew about the veil. 40 minutes later, she was in the back of a black Escalade with tinted windows, driving through empty Astoria streets in the rain. The driver had not once looked at her in the mirror. The shoebox with the money sat on the seat beside her. She had counted it out of habit. 15,000 in used hundreds. It smelled faintly of tobacco and old leather, the way money always smelled when it had passed through the pockets of the men she worked for. The car stopped in front of St. Sava's Rest on Ditmars Boulevard, a converted red brick row house, brass plaque, lace curtains. To anyone passing, it looked like a wedding chapel that had lost the will to celebrate. Cora had planned 4 funerals there over the years. She knew the vestry door stuck in humid weather. She knew, most importantly, that St. Sava's did not take walk-ins. It was booked 6 weeks in advance. For Inez to have secured it in the middle of the night on 4 hours' notice meant Inez, or whoever Inez worked for, was owed a very particular kind of favor by very particular kinds of people. Cora stepped out into the rain. Her coat was cheap. Her shoes were not. In this work, you dressed like the mourners, not the mourned. She did not know that the man in the coffin was, at that same moment, drinking cardamom espresso in the back of a warehouse in Long Island City, alive, and thinking about her. Before Cora opens that door and sees who is really in that coffin, if you are the kind of listener who stays for stories where the quiet woman in the back of the room turns out to be the one holding the map, hit subscribe, ring the bell. The next 90 seconds are going to unspool the last 3 years of Cora's life. You will want to be here for all of them. Now, the door. The chapel smelled of frankincense and Balkan lilies. 12 pews, a blue-painted apse, 2 heavy iron candelabras throwing shadows across a raised bier at the far end of the room. On the bier sat a closed walnut casket. Simple brass hardware. No flowers, which Cora noted, because in 300 funerals she had seen exactly 2 without flowers, and both had been for men whose enemies were expected to send bouquets loaded with listening devices. She walked up the center aisle at a professional pace, sightlines, exits, 2 doors, both to her back. Whoever had chosen this venue had chosen it because there was nowhere for a mourner to run. And then she saw the photograph. It was standing on top of the closed lid, a small silver picture frame tilted slightly toward the aisle so anyone walking up would see it before anything else. Cora stopped moving. The photograph in the frame was one she had last seen 5 years ago on a bookshelf in her own apartment. It had been taken on a rooftop in Astoria on a warm September afternoon from a low angle with her own arm outstretched holding the camera. In the picture, she was laughing. The man beside her was not looking at the camera. He was looking at her. Julian. The name came out of her mouth silently. She could feel her jaw working around it. Julian Castellan, 32 years old at the time of the photograph. A birthmark shaped like a comma on the left side of his throat. 3 years ago, on a Tuesday in October, 2 federal agents had stood in the door of her apartment and told her that her husband was dead in a parking garage in Newark, and that his body had already been claimed by a family she did not know he had. There had been no funeral, no body to view. She had gone into labor 11 weeks early, 3 nights later, in the same apartment, alone. By morning, she had lost the child, too. She had not spoken his name aloud in 2 years. Now his face was smiling up at her from the top of a walnut coffin at 6 in the morning, and someone had paid her $15,000 in cash to grieve for him. Her hands were shaking so hard the silver frame rattled against the wood when she picked it up. She turned it over. On the back, in handwriting she had once found on grocery lists taped to the inside of a kitchen cabinet, someone had written, "Cora, I am sorry. Please stay through the service. Nothing in this room is what you think it is. J." The K at the beginning of her name was the way he had always spelled it. Polish spelling. He was the only person in her adult life who had spelled it that way. Behind her, a man's voice, very quiet, said, "Please don't drop that. It is the only copy I have." Cora did not turn around. She set the frame back down on the coffin lid. She positioned it exactly where it had been. She straightened her shoulders. Then she turned. He was standing 3 pews back, in the shadow between 2 candelabras, wearing a wet black overcoat. His hair was shorter than she remembered. There was more gray in it than a 37-year-old man had any right to. He was thinner. There was a pale scar at the corner of his mouth that had not been there in the photograph. He was standing with his weight on his right leg because the left one was hurting him, which meant he had been shot at some point in the last 3 years and it had not healed clean. His eyes had not changed at all. "Cora," he said. "Don't," she said. He didn't. She had prepared herself, in the seconds between reading the note and turning around, for a number of possible reactions. Screaming, slapping him, walking out. She had not prepared herself for silence, so complete she could hear the tick of the antique clock above the vestry door. "You have 3 seconds," she said, "to tell me why I should not walk out that door right now. Because if you walk out that door in the next 15 minutes, the man watching this building from the coffee shop across the street is going to follow you home, and he is not with me." Cora's hand went to the strap of her bag. There was bear spray in the outer pocket and a folding knife in the wallet where a credit card ought to have been. Both had been Julian's ideas years ago. She had never taken them out. She had told herself it was habit. It had been something else. Who is he? His name is Vlado. He works for a man who thinks I have been dead for 3 years and would very much like to keep it that way. Then let him. He will take you first. Why? Because he already knows about you. He has always known about you. That is the part I need to explain. Cora set her bag down on the front pew. She did not sit. She did not step closer. She did not step further back. She stood on the bier next to the coffin of a man who was not dead, and she folded her arms. Then explain. Fast. Julian took 1 step forward. When he saw the way her shoulders set, he stopped. Rules first, he said. Yours. She had forgotten that about him, that he had always let her set the rules of the room. It was one of the things that had made her love him. It was also, right now, one of the things that made her want to pick up the silver frame and throw it at his head. Rule 1, she said. You do not touch me. Not now, not later, not unless I say otherwise. Agreed. Rule 2. You do not lie to me. Not by omission, not by softening. If I ask a question, I get the answer, or I get nothing. Nothing is fine. A soft version is not. Agreed. Rule 3. Her voice broke, just slightly, at the edge. You do not say his name until I say it first. Do you understand me? You do not speak about him. Julian was very still for a moment. Then he said, quietly, Him. Yes. You had a boy. I said, Cora said, and this time her voice was not steady at all. You do not speak about him. Julian nodded once. He did not apologize. That was another thing she had forgotten about him. He understood that some things could not be apologized for, only lived beside. Rule 3 accepted. Then tell me what I am doing here.
I am asking you to sit through the service, Julian said. The whole thing, front pew, veil on, the way you would for any client. There is a man coming to this funeral who ordered my death 3 years ago. He has spent 3 years suspecting he did not finish the job. This morning is the morning we sell him the fiction that he did. If he sees a widow in the front pew, he leaves believing what we need him to believe. If he sees an empty pew, he leaves believing the opposite. Everything after that, every conversation you and I are ever going to have, depends on the next 90 minutes. Cora looked at the closed lid of the coffin. She looked at her own laughing face in the silver frame. She looked at the man she had buried 3 years ago, standing 3 pews back, alive, waiting for her answer. Get me the veil, she said. The mourners started arriving at 7. There were 9 of them. Cora counted from behind the veil in the front pew, out of professional habit.
2 bodyguards. 3 men in their 30s who moved with the loose-shouldered arrogance of men about to inherit something they had not built. 2 older men who walked carefully, the way men walked when they had been shot at enough times to respect corners. And 2 priests. Only one of the priests was real. Cora could tell because the real one smelled faintly of the incense he had used earlier. The fake one smelled of nothing at all, which, in a working priest, was impossible. The fake priest sat in the 4th pew. He was a thin man in his 60s with a neatly trimmed white beard and pale blue eyes behind steel-framed glasses. He held his prayer book upside down for the first 3 minutes of the service. Then, with great deliberation, he turned it right side up. It was a signal. He was telling someone in the room that he knew the book was upside down and did not care, because the point of holding it was not to read it. The point was to be seen holding it.
This, Cora understood, was the man Julian had brought her here to bury. Not literally. figuratively. The whole ceremony was a piece of theater staged for one member of the audience, and that member was sitting in the fourth pew reading the wrong end of a hymnal. The real priest, a heavy-set man with a slow first-tone bass, began the service in Old Church Slavonic. Cora let it wash over her. She kept her eyes, through the veil, on the man in the fourth pew. There was a small mercy in the veil. It turned her, for the length of the service, into an object. The mourners did not look at her. Widows in this kind of room were not to be looked at. They were stage furniture that communicated loss without requiring anyone to process it. This anonymity was, in the moment, the one thing keeping her upright. At the point in the service where the mourners were invited to pay their respects, the man in the fourth pew was the third to rise. He walked up the aisle at a measured pace. He stopped in front of the closed casket. He laid one gloved hand on the walnut lid and kept it there for exactly 4 seconds. Then he crossed himself, kissed the small icon on the coffin, and walked back to his pew. He had not looked at the silver photograph even once. Cora let her breath out very slowly through her nose. At any real funeral, even a Mafia funeral, the personal photograph was the first thing a mourner looked at. Because the photograph was the only proof in the room that the person in the box had ever been a person. A man who did not look at the photograph was a man who did not believe the person in the box was really in the box. Or a man who had already seen the person in the box, alive, this morning. For the next hour, Cora sat with her hands folded and grieved, in public, for the man she had grieved for, in private, for 3 years. It was the most honest work she had ever done. The service ended in the Orthodox way, with the slow sung farewell of Ionia Imnimi. May his memory be eternal. The pallbearers came forward and lifted the walnut casket. They lifted it with the studied heaviness of men lifting an object lighter than they were pretending it was. Cora, who had watched 300 coffins leave 300 chapels, was probably the only person in the room who noticed the man on the front left corner shift his grip halfway down the aisle, in the way a man shifts a suitcase when he realizes he has overestimated the weight. An empty coffin at a Serbian funeral. In 5 years, she had seen almost everything. She had not seen that. The fake priest was the second-to-last mourner to leave. As he passed the front pew, he did the thing that told her, finally, who he was. He looked at her. Not at her face, the veil made that impossible, but at her hands, folded in her lap. He looked at them for a full 1.5 seconds. It was the look of a man cataloging a widow the way a jeweler catalogs a stone. He was measuring the width of her wrists. He was noting the absence of a wedding ring. He was, in short, deciding whether she was really a grieving widow or a piece of rented stage dressing. She kept her hands folded. She did not move. She did not lift the veil. He walked out. The last mourner closed the chapel door behind him. The silence that followed was the particular silence that follows a funeral. It is not, contrary to poetry, a peaceful silence. It is the silence of a room that has just performed grief for 90 minutes and is trying to remember what it sounded like before. Cora sat with her hands folded and listened to it. Behind her, footsteps. "Cora," Julian said. "Not yet." He stopped. She sat there for 2 more minutes. Then she stood up, in one smooth motion, without hesitation, because hesitation in a room like this was a thing that could be seen from the coffee shop across the street. "The second car," she said. "Where is it?" "Around the back. My sister is already in it." "You have a sister?" "I have a sister." "You told me your family was dead." "I lied about a great number of things, Cora. It is a long list." "I look forward to it," she said. "Move." The second car was a gray Cadillac, the kind of anonymous American sedan you could park in any borough of New York and no one would turn to look at it. The driver was a woman in her 40s, dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, wearing a black wool coat and no makeup. "Zdravo," the woman said when Cora slid into the back seat. "I don't speak Serbian." "Neither do I," the woman said in perfect Boston-inflected English. "I say it to see who answers. I am Ines. I have been keeping your husband alive for 3 years. Buckle up."
Cora's mouth opened. Then it closed. She buckled the seatbelt. They drove in silence for the first 6 blocks. Cora watched the rain on the window. She tried to feel something. Rage, grief, disbelief. There was a flat absence where all 3 should have been. She recognized the absence. It was the same one she had lived inside for the first 6 months after the 2 agents had come to her door. The Cadillac turned onto 21st Street. Astoria was waking up. A Greek man in an apron was hosing down the sidewalk in front of a bakery. An old woman with a 2-wheeled shopping cart was heading for the subway. It was an ordinary Queens morning after a long rain, and Cora Whitfield, veiled widow of a man who was not dead, was passing through it in the back seat of a car, driven by the sister-in-law she had not known she had. "You're his sister," Cora said. "I am." Inez glanced at her in the mirror. Her eyes were the same pale gray-green as Julian's. Cora did not know why she had not seen it in the first 3 seconds. "How long have you been doing this?" 3 years. 6 if you count the 2 years before you knew him. You knew him before we married. I found him again when he was 29 and in trouble. I have been the reason he is not in a landfill outside Trenton ever since. Inez took a corner smoothly, one hand on the wheel. "I don't like you, by the way. I want that on the record. I don't dislike you either. I have no opinion of you. But my brother has spent 3 years bleeding out slowly over the absence of you, and if you break him again this week, I will personally drive you to LaGuardia and put you on a plane. I will not be gentle about it. Are we clear?" Crystal. "Good. Now, what questions do you have that you don't want to ask him directly?" Cora thought about it. There were 50. There were 5,000. There were only 2 she could not ask across a table from him. "The baby," she said. "Did he know?" Inez was quiet for a moment. She took another corner. She turned onto the ramp for the Pulaski Bridge. "Yes, he knew you were pregnant. He did not know until 8 months later that you had lost the baby. When he found out, he drank for 6 days straight, and then he tried to walk into the East River in February. I pulled him out. He has not touched vodka since." Next question. Cora's throat closed. She waited until it opened again. "How did you find out that I had lost him?" "A woman in your building, Helena, 4th floor. Helena brought me cabbage rolls at Easter." "Helena brought you cabbage rolls at Easter, and Helena is also, and has been for 15 years, the sister-in-law of a man named Stepan, who married my mother's cousin in 1974. My family is not the only Balkan family in Astoria, Cora, but we have been there a long time. We look after each other." Cora put her hand over her mouth. She held it there for a while. The Cadillac crossed the peak of the Pulaski. Below them, the Newtown Creek was the color of wet slate. A single blue tugboat was making its way south under the bridge. Cora watched it because it was a thing she could look at that was not any of the other things. "Second question," Inez said after a while. Her voice was gentler now. The man in the fourth pew. Who is he? Ah, that is the interesting one. His name is Miloš Radić. He is the underboss of a Serbian organization out of Cleveland that used to be the parent organization of the Castellan family before my grandfather broke away in 1978. He is also, and this is the part your husband is going to want to tell you himself, the man who ordered the hit on Julian 3 years ago. The hit that made all of this necessary. He came to the funeral of the man he ordered killed. He came to the funeral of the man he ordered killed to confirm, in person, that the job he paid for 3 years ago had finally been finished. Because for 3 years, Miloš Radić has suspected that my brother was still alive. And he was correct. And this morning was the morning we finally sold him the fiction that he wasn't. Why now? Because 3 weeks ago, Miloš Radić sent a man to Astoria to take photographs of your apartment. We think he was preparing to move on you. And my brother, who has spent 3 years watching you from a distance and not touching a single vodka bottle, decided that if someone was going to move on you, it was going to be him. So we staged a funeral, and here we are. Cora looked at her hands in her lap. They were, she noticed, perfectly steady. How long has he been watching me? Every day since the agents came to your door. He was in the back of the ambulance the night you lost the baby. He was in the back pew at St. Andrew's in Greenpoint the Sunday you buried him. He has been in Astoria 3 days a week for 3 years, and he has never once spoken to you. The only reason he broke that rule tonight is because Miloš Radić broke it first. The Cadillac came down off the bridge. The rain had stopped. In the gray dawn light, Long Island City rose up ahead of them, glass towers and old brick warehouses shoulder to shoulder, like strangers waiting for the same bus. Ines. Yes? If I ask you one more question, will you tell me the truth? I have been telling you the truth for the last 4 minutes. I don't know how to start lying now. When he was drinking, the 6 days, was there a woman? Inez's hands tightened slightly on the wheel. No, there has never been a woman. Not since you. It is one of the many, many things about my brother I have found completely exasperating over the last 3 years. If it helps, I have tried on multiple occasions to introduce him to reasonable alternatives, and I have failed at all of them. Anything else? No. Good. Because we're here. She turned the wheel. The Cadillac slid down a ramp between 2 brick buildings. The warehouse door rolled up ahead of them. And Cora Whitfield, veiled widow of a man who was not dead, went in to meet her husband for the 2nd time in 1 morning. The warehouse had been a furniture workshop once. Cora could tell from the pale rectangles on the concrete floor where the machines had stood, and from the faint smell of sawdust and linseed oil hanging in the rafters. Now it was mostly empty. A freight elevator at the back, a single black SUV near the loading bay, and in the middle of the floor, under a hanging industrial lamp, a small wooden table with 2 chairs. On the table, 2 white cups of espresso and a plate of unsalted Balkan biscuits. Julian was standing next to the table. He had taken off the overcoat. In the plain black sweater underneath, she could see, finally, what she had not been able to see in the chapel. He had lost 20 pounds over 3 years. Most of it had come off in the wrong places. He watched her cross the floor. She sat down at the table. She picked up one of the espressos. It was cardamom. Of course it was. She drank half of it in 1 swallow. Talk, beginning to end. Do not stop until I stop you. Julian sat down opposite her. He talked. He talked for 40 minutes without stopping. He talked about the war between his father's organization and the Radek family in Cleveland, which had ended in a 1998 peace agreement that had held for 21 years and had been broken quietly in 2019 when Milos Radek began moving heroin through the same Newark shipyards the Castellans had controlled for 2 generations. He talked about the meeting in the parking garage in Newark that was meant to renegotiate the peace, and about the 2 shooters who had walked out of the stairwell instead. He talked about the round in his left thigh that had almost killed him.
He talked about the 22 hours in the back room of a Bosnian dentist's office in Patterson, while his sister, over the phone from Boston, negotiated with the only man on earth she trusted enough to fake a death certificate. He talked about the choice. The choice, he said, had not been a choice. If he came home to her, pregnant, 28 weeks, in a walk-up in Astoria with no security and no exit, Milos Radek would find them both inside of a month. If he disappeared with a body claimed and a headstone in the ground, Milos Radek would spend the rest of his life suspicious but unable to act. Because in the world Julian lived in, a dead man's wife was a dead man's wife. She could be watched. She could not be touched. Until 3 weeks ago, when someone in Cleveland had begun to suspect that the dead man was not really dead. Why did they suspect? Cora asked. Julian was quiet for a moment. Because I sent flowers. To who? To the grave, every October, on the anniversary. Cora closed her eyes. You went to his grave? Every October. I sat on the ground, I talked to him, for 3 years, and someone, somewhere in Radek's organization noticed, because of course they noticed, because I am, at the end of this, a stupid man who could not leave a dead child alone. Cora opened her eyes. Julian was looking at his hands on the table. The knuckles of his right hand were scarred in a way she did not remember. There was no wedding band on the ring finger. There had never been one, in the 2 years of their marriage. He had explained to her once, back when the explanation had seemed to hold together, that men in his kind of family did not wear the ring because the ring was a signal to competitors that a man had a piece of leverage on him that they could pick up and use. Sitting across from him now, 3 years later, she thought about how many other logically consistent explanations he had presented her with over their marriage, and about how the argument had always, at bottom, been the same. I will keep you safe by telling you a small, controlled portion of the truth. The problem, she had come to understand in the last hour, was that safe and informed were not the same thing. She set her espresso down. She reached across the table. For the first time in 3 years, she touched him. She placed her hand over his scarred right hand. Julian did not move. Rule 1 is suspended, she said. For 30 seconds. Do not confuse it with permanent. Understood. You went to his grave every October. Every October. Which cemetery? He told her. She had chosen it herself 5 years ago when she had bought a plot for her grandmother. It was a small Polish Catholic cemetery in Greenpoint. Her grandmother's plot had come with a second plot beside it that Cora had never filled. The night after the funeral, she had asked the groundskeeper, an old Silesian named Pan Victor, who had known her grandmother in Wrocław, to inter the boy in that second plot, because she had not been able to bear the idea of him being alone. She had told no one she had done this, not her mother, not her sister. How did you know which grave? She said. I paid the groundskeeper, the day of the funeral. I was in the back of the cemetery in a caretaker's van. I watched them lower him. You paid Pan Victor? 10,000. He didn't take my extra 100.
Pan Victor accepts payment for a service. He does not accept payment for grief. Your 100 was a bribe against the sacred. My 10,000 was a bribe against a piece of information. He is Silesian. They make distinctions. Cora took her hand off his, not in anger. She needed the hand back, because she needed to press it against her own mouth. She was going to make a sound she did not want to make in front of him, and she needed the hand to hold the sound in. She held it in for a minute. Julian did not speak. He did not move. He sat across from her, and he let her hold the sound in, because he understood, he had always understood, that some sounds could not be witnessed, only permitted. When she finally lowered her hand, her face was wet. Her voice was almost steady. What happens now? That depends on you. Wrong answer. What happens now? Julian looked at her for a long moment. Now I take you to Sag Harbor, a house no one in either organization knows exists. You stay there 2 weeks while I finish, in Cleveland, what this morning began. At the end of 2 weeks, I come to you and we sit down at another table. You decide, with all the information you need, whether you ever want to see me again. If you say no, I put you on a plane, any city you name. And if I say yes, then we do not go back to the walk-up in Astoria. Ever. But we pick a city. Cora looked at him. She looked at the scar at the corner of his mouth, at the gray at his temples, at the 20 pounds of weight he had lost in the wrong places. She looked at the empty ring finger of his right hand. There is a third option, she said. What third option? I don't go to Sag Harbor. I go with you. To Cleveland. The silence that followed was different from any of the silences that had come before. It was, Cora thought, the silence of a man recalculating the shape of the rest of his life. No, Julian said. Not a request. Cora, you do not get to spend 3 years watching me from a distance and then, when you finally sit across a table from me, send me to Sag Harbor. That is not how this ends. I am the reason he sent a man to photograph my apartment 3 weeks ago. I am the leverage point. You do not solve leverage by hiding the lever. You solve leverage by making the lever heavier than the man trying to move it. You don't know what you are offering. I know exactly what I am offering. I have planned 300 funerals for men in your business. The women who go into hiding survive an average of 11 months. I know that because I have organized 6 of those funerals. The women who don't hide survive 12 years or die in the first 6 weeks. There is no middle. This is not romance, Julian. This is arithmetic. I have been counting. Julian stared at her. You've been counting. I have been counting for 3 years. Every funeral, every widow. Do not sit across this table and tell me I don't know what I am offering. He looked at her for a long time. Then he said quietly, Milos Radic has a daughter. I know. How do you know? Because 4 years ago I planned the funeral of one of his cousins. His daughter Anna came to the service. She was 16. She sat in the 3rd pew and cried for 2 hours. And afterward, she asked me if I could recommend a florist in Cleveland who would send freesias to her mother's grave every October because her father would not do it. I gave her the name of a florist. I also gave her my private cell phone number. She has called it, on average, twice a year for 4 years. She called me 2 weeks ago about a boy she met at a coffee shop in Cleveland Heights and does not know how to tell her father about. I have been the woman she calls, Julian, when she cannot call her father. And she has been, for 4 years, the lever I did not know I would one day need. Julian went very still. That is a coincidence. It is a coincidence. It is also, if you know how to hold it, an axis of rotation. She picked up her espresso. She finished it. She set the cup down gently in the exact center of its saucer. Take me to Cleveland. If you are still with me at this point in the story, a woman who buried her own child 3 years ago has just sat down across from her not dead husband and told him she is going to walk into the house of the man who ordered his execution. Because the man's daughter has been calling her private cell phone for 4 years and does not know she has been calling the wife of her father's target. If that landed for you, hit the like button. It is the only thing that tells the algorithm to keep pushing stories like this one into rooms full of people who need them. What happens in Cleveland is going to make the funeral in Astoria look like a warm-up act. Back to Cora. 20 minutes later, they were in a black SUV heading west out of Long Island City. Julian in the front seat beside a driver Cora did not know. Ines behind the wheel of the Cadillac following 2 cars back. They drove in silence through Pennsylvania. It began to rain again somewhere past Harrisburg. The wipers came on. Cora watched the exit signs. Places she had never been. Places she had never expected to go. At some point past the Ohio border, still not looking at her, Julian spoke for the first time in 5 hours. Cora, you should know one thing before we get to Cleveland. What? Anna Radic, he said. The girl who has been calling you? She is not 16 anymore. I know, she is 20. That is not what I mean. He was quiet for a moment. Then he turned in his seat for the first time since they had left the warehouse and looked at her. 2 months ago, Milos Radic disowned her. She has been living in a rental apartment in Ohio City with her cousin. She has not spoken to her father in 7 weeks. And 2 weeks ago, when she called you about the boy in the coffee shop, the reason she did not know how to tell her father was not because the boy is unsuitable. It is because she has just started, 3 weeks ago, working for the man who is trying to kill me. Cora did not answer for a long time. Ahead of them, past the wet windshield, past the low gray sky, the first faint lights of Cleveland began to rise up out of the horizon. She looked at them. She thought, axis of rotation. She said, very quietly, "Then that is the room we are walking into." They pulled into a small residential street in Ohio City just after 8 in the evening. 2-story brick houses. Narrow driveways, the kind of neighborhood where people put out their trash cans on Monday nights and their pumpkins on the 1st of October. Cora had not been expecting a 2-story brick house. She had been expecting something with a wall around it. "She lives here?" she said. "With her cousin," Julian said. "The cousin is not home tonight. The cousin is with a boyfriend in Lakewood. Anna is alone." "You know her cousin's schedule?" "I have known Anna's cousin's schedule for 2 months. I have known that Milos Radic disowned Anna for 2 months. I have known that Anna was recruited by our enemy for 3 weeks. I did not tell you before because I needed you to make the decision to come with me without that piece of information. If you had known, you would have thought I was manipulating you into it. I need you to know I was not. You are manipulating me into it. I am, but not with information I withheld." Cora looked at him. "Get out of the car," she said. "I will go in alone." "Cora, you said you would not lie to me. You said you would not manage me, so do not manage me now. Anna Radic has been calling my personal cell phone for 4 years. She does not know you exist. If you come in with me, we lose the only asset we have. Get out of the car, cross the street, wait in the coffee shop on the corner. Give me 1 hour." Julian sat very still for a moment. Then he opened the door, got out of the SUV, and crossed the street without looking back. Cora watched him go. Then she took a breath, opened her own door, and walked up the narrow driveway to the front door of a 2-story brick house in Cleveland, where a 20-year-old girl was waiting for a text she was never going to send. She rang the bell. The girl who opened the door was smaller than Cora remembered from the funeral 4 years ago. Dark hair, pale, tired eyes. She was wearing pajama pants and an oversized sweatshirt that said Case Western across the chest. She looked at Cora for a full second before her face broke. "Oh God," she said. "Oh my God. What are you doing here?" "Anna, may I come in?" How did you know where I... May I come in?" Anna stepped back. Cora walked into the small living room of the 2-story brick house. There was a couch, there was a television. There was, on the coffee table, an open laptop with a spreadsheet Cora recognized on sight because she had seen its cousins on the coffee tables of half a dozen mob wives over the years. It was a ledger. Somebody was teaching Anna how to keep the books. "Anna," Cora said, "sit down." Anna sat. "I need to tell you a story," Cora said. "It will take about 10 minutes. When I am done, you are going to have a choice to make. It will be the biggest choice you have made in your life so far. I am going to ask you to make it very fast. But I am not going to lie to you, and I am not going to leave anything out. Nod if you understand." Anna nodded. Cora sat down opposite her. She folded her hands in her lap the way she had folded them in the front pew at St. Sava's Rest 12 hours and 500 miles ago. 4 years ago, when you called me from your cousin's funeral and asked me about a florist, Cora said, I was not the person you thought I was. I was a woman whose husband had, 1 year before, been shot in a parking garage in Newark by 2 men working for your father. I did not know that at the time. I have known it for 11 hours. I found out this morning, in a chapel in Queens, at a funeral I had been paid $15,000 to attend. The funeral was for my husband. My husband was not in the coffin. My husband was standing 3 pews back, alive, waiting for me to turn around. He is now, at this exact minute, sitting in a coffee shop 3 doors down the street. He is the reason I am in your living room. Anna's mouth was open. Cora kept talking. For 4 years, I have been the woman you called when you could not call your father. I did not know that the man I was widowed to was the man your father tried to kill. If I had known, I would have told you. I did not know. I want to say that clearly. I am telling you now, in the first 10 minutes after finding it out myself, because you deserve to hear it from me before you hear it from anyone else. Do you understand what I am telling you? Yes. Now, 3 weeks ago you started working for a man. I do not know his name yet. I know he is trying to kill my husband. I know your father disowned you 2 months ago, and I know you have not spoken to him in 7 weeks. I know you are keeping books on a laptop that is sitting on that coffee table. I am not here to ask you to stop. I am not here to ask you to betray anyone. I am here to ask you one question. And I am asking it because I owe you the chance to answer it before your life becomes something you cannot walk back from. Cora leaned forward. Anna, the man you are working for, did he approach you or did you go to him? Anna was quiet for a long time. Her eyes were wet. She was pulling at a loose thread on the cuff of the Case Western sweatshirt. He approached me, she said, 3 weeks ago, in the coffee shop. He said he knew my father had disowned me. He said he had watched me for a long time. He said he had a job. He said the job paid enough that I would not have to go back to my father ever again. What did you say? I said yes. I said yes, because I have $4,000 in my checking account, and I owe $17,000 in tuition, and my cousin is going to ask me to move out at the end of the month because her boyfriend is moving in. I said yes, because I did not have another answer. What did he ask you to do first? Keep books, small ones. He said if I did the small ones right, he would show me the bigger ones. Has he asked you to do anything else? Anna hesitated. Anna. He asked me, Anna said slowly, for the name of a florist in Cleveland who sends freesias to a specific grave every October. He said if I asked around, if I asked the right people, I could find out who was paying for the freesias. He said if I brought him that name, he would pay off my tuition. All of it. In cash. This week. Cora closed her eyes. She sat with them closed for a very long moment. When she opened them, she looked directly at Anna. That florist is the one I recommended to you 4 years ago, Cora said. The freesias are for a grave in a Polish Catholic cemetery in Greenpoint. The grave belongs to my son. The man paying for the freesias is my husband. If you bring him that name, my husband dies. Do you understand? Anna's face went white. I did not know. I believe you. I did not know it was you. I believe you, Anna. Sit still. Breathe. I need you to breathe. Anna breathed. Cora waited until the girl's shoulders had come down from her ears. Then she said, very quietly, Now here is your choice, and I want you to hear me carefully because I am only going to say it once. You can walk out of this house tonight, with me, right now, and I will put you on a plane in the morning to any city in this country. You will start over. You will not be Anna Radic anymore. You will be someone else. It will be hard, and it will be lonely, and it will be the smallest life you have ever imagined for yourself. That is option 1. Option 2, you stay. You give this man the name of the florist. My husband dies. Your father wins a war he has been trying to win for 3 years, and you get $17,000, and you live in Cleveland. And every October for the rest of your life, when you see freesias in a shop window, you will remember that the woman who took your calls for 4 years ended up burying 2 people because of you. Option 3. You stay. You do not give him the name. You keep working for him, and you give me every week everything you learn about him. Everything. His schedule, his people, his plans, where he sleeps, who he sees, who he pays. My husband and I will do the rest. If we do it right, in 6 weeks the man you are working for will be gone. Your father, who disowned you, will owe his life to a favor he does not yet know he needs. And you will be, at the end of it, exactly the kind of person your father spent your entire childhood trying to prevent you from becoming. Which is to say, a person of your own weight, whose favor is worth calling in. That is the whole choice. I am not going to help you make it. I am going to sit here for exactly 2 minutes, and then I am going to stand up and walk out of this house. And whichever way you have decided by the time I stand up, that is the way it will go. Do you understand? Anna nodded. Cora sat. The clock on Anna's kitchen wall ticked. Somewhere in the house, a refrigerator hummed. On the street outside, a car passed slowly, then another. Cora did not look at Anna. Cora looked at her own hands. She had learned, over 5 years in this work, that the moment a person made the largest decision of their life was the moment you owed them the small courtesy of not watching their face while they made it. At the 90-second mark, Anna said, Option 3. Cora looked up. Say it again, so I know you meant it. Option 3. Good, Cora said. Then close the laptop. Put on shoes. We are going for a walk. You are going to meet someone. Who? My husband. He is at the coffee shop on the corner. He is going to be very confused for about 30 seconds. After that, he is going to be the second most useful person you have ever met in your life. The first one is me.
Come on." The three of them sat in the back booth of the coffee shop for 2 hours. Julian did not speak for the first 10 minutes. He sat with his hands wrapped around a mug of black coffee, listening, while Anna explained the man she was working for. The man's name was Dragan. He was Milos Radic's second cousin. He had been passed over for underboss 6 years ago and had never forgiven it. He had been building his own operation quietly on the side ever since, and 3 weeks ago he had made his first move against a Castellan asset, Julian specifically, because a Castellan scalp was the price he needed to pay to convince 3 families in Chicago to back him against Milos. In other words, Dragan was not trying to finish Milos's old job. Dragan was trying to steal Milos's job, which meant that Milos Radic, the man who had ordered Julian's death 3 years ago, was, at this exact moment, sitting on top of a coup he did not yet know was happening. And the person best positioned to warn Milos Radic that a coup was coming was the wife of the man he had tried to kill. Cora watched Julian's face while Anna talked. She watched him doing the arithmetic. She watched him land on the same conclusion she had already landed on, halfway through Anna's third sentence. "You are going to walk into Milos's house tomorrow night," Julian said finally, to Cora, not to Anna, to Cora. "You are going to sit across from him. You are going to tell him what his cousin is doing, and you are going to ask him for 2 things in exchange for the information. 1, he calls off the 3-year-old contract on my life, officially, in front of his men, tomorrow night at that dinner. 2, he acknowledges Anna, publicly, restores her, tomorrow night at that dinner." Cora nodded. "And in exchange, we hand him Dragan, alive if possible, dead if not." Julian was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Cora, Milos Radic hates me. He has hated me since 2019. He will not agree to the first term. He will if the second one is on the table. He disowned Anna. He has been trying for 2 months to find a way to walk it back without losing face. I am giving him one. In exchange for a piece of information that saves his empire, he will make the trade." "How do you know?" "Because," Cora said, "I have planned 300 funerals for men in your business, and in every one of them, the man in the coffin had, at some point in the previous 10 years, made a decision he could not walk back. The men in your business die because they cannot walk decisions back. Milos Radic is being offered a chance to walk one back without paying a price. Nobody in your business turns that down. Nobody." Anna was watching both of them, mug forgotten in her hands. Her eyes were very wide. "You are going to my father's house," she said, "tomorrow night." "Yes." "He will kill you." "No," Cora said. "He will listen to me, because I am going to walk in with you." Anna went very still. "That is the piece that makes it work," Cora said gently. "You have not spoken to him in 7 weeks. He has been waiting for you to call. He has not slept properly in 50 days. If you walk through his door tomorrow night on your own 2 feet with a woman he has never met, he will not shoot us in the foyer. He will let us into the dining room. He will let us sit down. He will let us talk. That is all we need. 20 minutes at the table. After that, everything is arithmetic." Anna looked at her hands. "He will be angry." "He will be angry for about 4 minutes. After the 4th minute, he will be listening." I know what a man who has not slept in 50 days looks like at his own dinner table. He looks like a man who is very ready to be given a way out.
Anna was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "All right." The dinner was set for the following evening at 7. Milos Radic lived in a large stone house in Lyndhurst, an old money suburb east of the city. The house had been built in 1927 by an oil man. Milos had bought it in 2004 for cash. It had 8 bedrooms, a wine cellar, a dining room that seated 20, and a private chapel on the 3rd floor where his late wife had said the rosary every morning until the day cancer took her out of it. Cora had learned all of this in the last 6 hours from Inez, who had spent the previous 11 months, quietly, from Boston, building a dossier on every square meter of the property. Cora and Anna arrived at the front gate at 6:50. Anna was in a dark blue dress her cousin had chosen for her that afternoon. Cora was in the same black dress she had worn to the chapel in Queens 24 hours earlier, without the veil. The bear spray was still in her bag. The knife was still in her wallet. They were, at this point, comforts of habit more than tools. The room she was walking into was not a room a knife would solve. The gate opened. They walked up the long gravel drive. The front door opened before they reached it. The man who opened it was in his early 60s, silver hair, tailored gray suit, pale blue eyes that Cora recognized in a small, strange lurch of the stomach, because she had seen those same eyes across the 4th pew of a chapel in Queens at 9 that morning. Milos Radic had been at the funeral in the second identity. He had come to bury Julian a second time in the same day. He was staring at Anna. He did not say anything for a full 10 seconds. His mouth worked around a word he was not saying. Then his eyes went to Cora, and something in them sharpened, because he was, above everything else, a man who noticed the wrong person in a room. "You are not one of Anna's friends," he said. "No, my name is Cora. May we come in?" He stared at her for another beat. Then he stepped back and let them into the house. 2 things happened in the next 20 minutes that decided the shape of everything that came after. The first was that Milos Radic broke down, for approximately 15 seconds, in the foyer of his own house when Anna let him hug her. He did not cry. Men in his kind of business had trained themselves not to cry in decades, but he made a sound. A small, quiet sound at the back of his throat that Cora had heard 300 times before in 300 receiving lines. It was the sound a man made when the person he had lost turned out not to be lost. It was the sound Julian had not made in the warehouse the previous morning, because Julian had been keeping himself from making it for 3 years. The second was that Milos Radic, without releasing his daughter, looked over her shoulder directly at Cora and said, "Whoever you are, whatever you are here to tell me, sit down, I am listening." They sat down at a small breakfast table in the kitchen because Milos said he could not, tonight, sit in the formal dining room. Cora, who had understood the geometry of that room from 6 feet away, did not argue. She told him what Dragan was doing. She told him about the ledger on Anna's coffee table. She told him about the freesias and the florist, and the fact that the coup Dragan was building had been paid for in advance by 3 Chicago families whose names she had learned that morning from Julian. She told him the truth, in 22 minutes without ornament, in the tone she had used at 300 receiving lines to explain to newly bereaved parents exactly what a coroner's report meant. Milos Radic listened without interrupting. When she was done, he sat for a long moment looking at his daughter. His daughter was looking at the floor. "You knew," he said to Anna. "For 3 weeks, you knew." "I knew for 3 weeks that a man named Dragan was paying me to keep books," Anna said. "I did not know he was your cousin. I did not know he was building a coup. I found out an hour ago, from her." She lifted her eyes and looked at her father for the first time. I called her 4 years ago because there was no one else. I have been calling her twice a year since. I did not know 4 years ago that her husband was a man you tried to kill. She did not know either. We are both finding out this week." Milos looked at Cora. "Your husband is alive." "Yes." "He is in Cleveland."
Yes. He was in the chapel this morning. Yes. He wants a truce. He wants 2 things, a truce and your public acknowledgement of Anna. And in exchange, you get Dragan, in whatever condition you prefer him." Milos was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "How long has your husband known that Dragan was moving on him?" 6 days, Cora said, "since Inez pulled the last piece of the ledger out of a laptop in Sofia. And in 6 days, he did not come to me directly." "He was not going to come to you directly. He was going to let Dragan take you first, and then walk in and pick up the pieces. He was going to inherit your organization by not lifting a finger. That was the plan he had before I met you tonight. It is not the plan anymore. I changed it. Because I was not going to stand in your foyer in front of your daughter and let 2 families of orphans be made when 1 phone call could stop it." Milos looked at her for a very long time. Then he said quietly in Serbian, a sentence Cora did not understand. Anna translated in a small voice. He said, "You are a very dangerous woman." "I am not dangerous," Cora said. "I am a woman who plans funerals. I know what they look like. I do not want to plan yours. I do not want to plan Anna's. I do not want to plan my husband's. Twice was enough." Milos Radic gave a single, dry laugh. Then he stood up. He walked to a phone on the wall. He picked it up. He dialed a number from memory. He said, in English, "Bring Dragan to the house, alive, tonight. And send word to New York. The contract on Castellan is closed. It never existed. If anyone raises the name Castellan in my hearing after tonight, they answer for it." He hung up. He looked at Anna. "Your bedroom is still your bedroom," he said, in English, so Cora could hear. "It has been made every day for 8 weeks, in case you came back." Anna started to cry. Cora stood up. "I will leave you 2, she said. "There is a man in a coffee shop 3 miles from here who has been waiting 11 hours for me to walk out of this house on my own 2 feet. I would like to go tell him I did." Milos Radic looked at her. Something in his face was still moving. She could not read it. She was not sure he could either. "Tell him," Milos said finally, "that there is a Serbian custom. When the man's death is undone, the man owes a debt to whoever undid it. The debt is called krivna. It is not a debt of money. It is a debt of blood, meaning that any child of the man's from that day forward has, in the eyes of the family, a second father. If Dragan had succeeded, my daughter would have been orphaned twice, once by me, once by him. She is not orphaned. Tell your husband his krivna to me is that if my daughter ever needs a second father, he is it. Tell him I said this in my own kitchen, in my own voice, in front of her. He will understand." Cora nodded once. She walked out of the stone house in Lyndhurst. She walked down the long gravel drive. At the gate, a black SUV was waiting for her. Julian was in the passenger seat. He got out when he saw her coming. He stood in the road under the yellow light of a street lamp with his hands at his sides. He was, she noticed, standing evenly on both legs for the first time since he had walked out of the shadow of the candelabras. She walked up to him.
She did not stop until she was close enough to touch him. Then she did. She reached up and put her palm flat against the pale scar at the corner of his mouth, and she left it there. "Rule 1, she said, is over. Permanently." He closed his eyes. He turned his head, very slightly, so his mouth was against the inside of her wrist. He did not say anything. He did not need to. There were, she understood, some sounds a man could not make aloud after 3 years of not making them. She let him have the wrist. She let him have the mouth. She let him have all of it. Then she said, softly, "Take me home." "Which home?" "The one we haven't picked yet." They stood together in the yellow light of the street lamp for another long minute. Then they got in the SUV. Inez pulled up behind them in the Cadillac. The two cars pulled away from the gate of the stone house in Lyndhurst and drove east through the dark streets of Cleveland toward a highway that would carry them, eventually, back to a city Cora had not yet chosen. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday morning, Cora walked into the small Polish Catholic cemetery in Greenpoint with a bunch of white freesias in her hand. She was not alone. Julian walked beside her, on her right. On her left, in a gray coat and a knit hat, walked a 20-year-old girl who had, 4 days earlier, moved into the second bedroom of a small apartment in Boston that Inez had rented for her, under a name that was not Anna Radic. The girl was going to enroll at Boston University for the spring semester. Her tuition, all of it, had been paid the previous Tuesday in a lump sum from a numbered account that had, until then, belonged to a man named Dragan. They walked to the 2 plots at the back of the cemetery. Cora's grandmother on the right, the small stone with the small name on the left. Cora laid the freesias on the small stone. She stood there for a while. Julian stood beside her. Anna stood a respectful 3 steps back. The morning was cold and clear. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a church bell began to ring. Julian said very quietly, "Cora, I have kept a piece of information from you for 3 years, and I have not told you yet. And I am telling you now because I promised I would not lie to you by omission. On the night you went into labor, in the ambulance, when I told you my sister was in the back of it with you, she was. But so was I. I was in the front seat with the driver. I could not come to the back. I could not let you see me. But I was there. I have not been able to say that until now. I am saying it now." Cora was quiet for a long time. Then she reached out, without looking at him, and she took his hand. "I know," she said. "I always knew. I did not know what I knew, but I knew." She squeezed his hand once. "Come on," she said. "Pan Victor is watching us from the shed. He wants his coffee." They walked out of the cemetery together in the cold, clear morning. 3 people whose names, in various combinations, were on more headstones and more forged death certificates than any 3 people in Greenpoint had any right to be. The bell in the church across the street was still ringing. Somewhere behind them, in the small plot at the back of the cemetery, a bunch of white freesias sat on a small stone in the cold morning sun. Somewhere between the 4th pew of a Serbian chapel and a stone house in a Cleveland suburb, Cora Whitfield stopped being the woman who planned other people's funerals and became the woman who unplanned her own. Now here's what I want to know from you. If you had been sitting across from Julian in that warehouse, cardamom espresso in your cup, the man you buried 3 years ago breathing 3 feet away, would you have gone to Sag Harbor? Or would you have gone to Cleveland? There is no wrong answer. There is only your answer. Tell me in the comments. Was it the 4th pew that got you? The moment Anna chose option 3? The street lamp at the gate of the stone house? The freesias on the small stone? Drop the moment that stayed with you. I read every single comment on this channel, and the ones that stay with me shape the stories that come next. If this one pulled you all the way through,
Subscribe to Mafia Boss Vault and ring the bell so you do not miss the next one. New stories drop regularly, and every file we open changes everything. See you inside the vault.